What's up, people? It's another edition of the New Breed Podcast, the world's best new metal adjacent podcast from two dudes who are really there. One half of your host, Joe Jay Horsecow. With me, I have my partner in crime, the notorious Tim Anderson Jr. Tim, how's it going?
Great.
All
Feeling
right.
great.
Tim is feeling great. I'm wearing a toque. Let's get started. This week, everybody, we're doing something completely different. We're doing a lot of that this year, so kind of get ready. We're not talking about metal, and we're not talking about new metal specifically. And if you were paying attention and you noticed at the year-end review episode, Tim and I both had two different playlists that we created. One was Tim's top 5 hip-hop albums of the year, and mine was top 5 electronic. Well, this week we're doing something about hip-hop. And what we're going to talk about is New York 90s hip-hop and how it truly is the golden age of rap and hip-hop. Not sure how many of you are hip-hop fans. Maybe some of you are. If you are, I hope you enjoyed this. If you're not necessarily a hip-hop fan, don't turn it off yet. Don't turn it off yet. Give it a little bit. Enjoy the conversation. You might learn something you didn't know. You might pick up some album you didn't realize that you liked. Tim, I'll go first. This is the only hip-hop I listen to. Anything after 2001 to me is just trash. I don't listen to it at all.
Wow.
I
I
don't.
mean,
It's all the old school stuff is what I want to listen to. And sadly, it's the Mr. Baby Oil, Puffy, and Biggie. And while I still listen to 50 Cent because I find him absolutely hysterical. He is so petty. He is so petty. And like, God, a guy should have been a comedian. But yeah, this to me was when it was best. Truly was when it was best.
100% I agree with that. And yeah, I mean, the first hip hop I ever listened to is New York stuff. So I'm very fond of it. Very
So
fond of some of the groups we're going to talk about. So
we're going to dig into cultural climate. We're going to dig into what was going on in the world in New York at that time. We're going to talk about the trends to that point, and then we're going to talk about where things went and how we ended up today. So for those of you that are not hip hop minded, I would say sit back, get a cup of coffee, and enjoy this conversation. You might encounter something you really enjoy. Tim, we're going to start by setting the stage. So we're going to start with the 90s in New York City. And this truly is considered by many journalists, by many fans of hip hop, as the golden era. And if we look backwards, in the 70s, hip hop was like block party music. It's the stuff you put on at the cookout when you had the block party. That was what the 70s hip hop was considered. The 80s really was around 808s and drum machines, and that really helped to drive a lot of the innovation. And then we reached the 90s, which was truly a step change in maturity. And this is where hip hop starts to balkanize, to break off into different subgenres. Up until this point, not to say it was a monoculture, but it all basically sounded the same because it was truly nascent. And then all of a sudden things go out into different places. It becomes commercially viable. It influences global, not only hip hop, but pop culture as well. And some of the people we're going to talk about truly are pop culture icons. But I think let's start with talking about the early 90s in New York City, what it was like sociopolitically. I mean, so picture the United States in the 90s, right? This is the tail end of the crack epidemic.
yeah.
You have Rudy Giuliani as mayor in New York. This is quality of life policing, broken windows policing. Some like it, some don't. This was Times Square becoming like Disneyland, like it is today. And for those of you that are too young to remember, or West Coast, left coast, Europe fans, Times Square was seedy as all hell. It
Yeah.
was all porn shops and bums and peep
Prostitution.
shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was something else. Not like it is today, where there's like 9 different dudes wearing a Spider-Man costume trying to give you $20 to take a picture with them.
Yeah. Back
So it
then,
was.
it was dangerous to walk down. It was dangerous to be on at night, especially night.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
It
was
was.
it was a different world. It was a
Well,
different world. And it's kind of funny that hip hop starts as like in the Bronx, right? As like a thing you heard in the Bronx in the parks. And it went from this kind of localized subculture to it's a $1 billion industry now. $1 billion industry. And the 90s, again, lingering shadows, the 80s. The crack epidemic killed the inner city. It killed it. You had a whole generation of young adults coming of age in a system where the society was basically forgotten them. They were neglected. There was still a lot of violence in the city. The murder rate in New York City peaked in 1990. And when you consider that, and when you consider where some of these artists came from, Queensbridge, Bed-Stuy, Stapleton. My brother lives in Bed-Stuy? No, my brother lives on the border of Bed-Stuy and Bushwick, and it's really kind of dicey. Uh, when you had these New York artists like Nas and Mobb Deep and the Wu-Tang Clan, when they're rapping about violence, they're not rapping about violence for to be shocking or to drive a conversation, right? To put on airs like they're tough. That literally was what they grew up with.
Yeah.
Um, Chuck D called hip hop a ghetto CNN because if you listen to hip hop and you listen to the lyrics, it became like this the reality of what was going on in New York City at the time, specifically the outer boroughs. Tim, you ever been up to any of the outer boroughs? I know you've been to Manhattan, but have you been to
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the Bronx? You've been out to like Queens or any of that stuff?
I have not, but in obviously we went on school trips to like, all the popular spots, but I
Mm-hmm,
honestly
mm-hmm.
can't remember. I've never been there like as an adult and like walked around like stuff like that, or I've never been to like a show there. I think you have. I know you have. But no, I haven't. I could imagine that certain parts of Philadelphia would pretty much resemble what goes on there or
Yes, so like around the tower, parts of West Philly, parts of Derby,
yeah.
kind of look like how some of the outer boroughs look like, and sadly still look like in parts of New York. I remember when I saw Backstabbers Inc. playing in Allentown, they were doing a double header or what's it called when they play two shows in the same day? I guess a double header. And the second show, they were like, "Where are you guys playing?" And they're like, "Yonkers," which is out near the raceway. And we're like, and me and Rob looked at each other. We looked at the guy. We're like, yo, lock the van, man. It's not a good scene. But there was a lot of graffiti. There was public drinking. There was crime kind of everywhere. And you have this, I, I can't think of any other way to say it other than a lower class sense of existence clashing against the rapid gentrification that Rudy Giuliani is bringing on through Times Square. And with that friction, you're going to hear a lot of interesting stories come from the artists at the time because they're watching their world change out from under them.
Yeah, I mean, shit, the dudes from Infamous Mob which is, just dudes that are not part of Mob Deep, obviously, because Mob Deep was, Prodigy and Havoc, but there was another group called Infamous Mob. There still is, actually. They always talked about reality rap. It's what they talked about,
Yep.
reality rap.
Talk about what you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Virgin Megastore, the famous place where the Dillinger Escape Plan, they played that show and you see Ben run into whatever his name, the guy run into the audience. That used to be an HMV. I remember going there to buy CDs and having guys outside a peep show trying to drag me in, obviously looking like 15, and they're trying to drag you in. So Times Square was not Disneyland like it is now.
What's
And
that? What's that show that was on Showtime or HBO with James Franco?
oh, it was like the history of the porn industry or something, right?
Kinda, yeah. But what's that called? The
I
something.
know what you're talking about. Hold on, let's vamp.
Yeah,
James
the
Franco,
something, and like
HB.
he played a
Oh, the
twin in there too.
Deuce.
Yeah, the
The
Deuce. Yeah,
Deuce.
that was all about
Um,
Times Square, wasn't it?
uh-huh. It was about yep, the sex trade industry in the heart of New York's Times Square. You know what? I never watched that, but now that it's done, I should download the whole thing. It
It's
was an
good.
interesting time in New York. And people don't realize, especially younger people who are walking around like, oh, it's always been like this. No, it used to be literally a shithole. It literally
Oh
was
yeah.
a shithole.
Oh yeah, dude. It was rebuilt a lot.
And now there's an Olive Garden in Times Square. God help us all. All right, let's talk about Tim. Let's talk a little bit about the tools of the trade, right? So let's talk about some of the machines, the hardware. We'll talk about the producers, and we'll talk about. I mean, this is the birth of what we know as boom bap. And for those that aren't familiar, the term refers to the quote hard hitting prominent drum patterns that define production. The heavy kick drum is the boom, on the downbeat, and the sharp snare on the upbeat was the bap.
Correct.
So you have the boom bap sound, and this truly, in what I do in IT, right, there's this thing called an enabling constraint, where when you can't do something, you need to look at it as well. It's allowing you to do something else because you're constrained. Being as these samplers were only 12 bits, right? Vinyl was still around, which allowed the hip hop and the scratching. You now enabled a certain sound to come about because you had to work with what you got.
Yeah.
You had to work with what you were using. And the two machines, per our research, everybody, Tim and I do a decent amount of research for these episodes. The two machines that are largely attributed to the sound of 90s New York hip hop is the Emu,
EM,
Emu,
EMU.
EMU,
Yeah.
SP 1200, and the
Yeah.
Akai MPC 60.
Yeah, man.
So the EMU SP 1200, released in 1987, it offered 10 seconds of sampling time and 12-bit sampling resolution. So in order to maximize the sample time, this was interesting when I read this. In order to maximize sample time, producers would speed up records from 33 RPM to 45 RPM before sampling them, but then they would pitch them back down with the machine.
Yep.
So this was detuning
Still
or the
happens
ring
these
mod
days.
effect. Introduced what called unique digital aliasing. So one of the things that's attributable to this 90s hip hop sound is it strips off the high-end recording sheen, right? The overproduced sheen, and it really brought out your low end. So it creates griminess. There's a word that shows up all the time in hip hop, right? Gritty, grimy, crunchy. The RZA was known to useless religiously. Pete Rock,
Yeah.
and a lot of what can be considered the warmth of music of this time was a direct result of this machine, right? Because it's using analog filters, and you're using analog filters and a degraded sound quality of the original, which added this, I don't know, kind of like a worn out vinyl texture sound thing,
Lo-fi.
yeah, lo-fi makes
Yeah.
it gritty. So while the EMU is the grimy aspect of it, then we have the Akai MPC 60. So this was released in 1988, and this allowed it. One of the big differences with this machine is not all the drums did not have to be quantized. So for those of you that are not musicians, I learned this myself. When you quantize something, you snap it to a rigid grid. So your four beats or 4 beats or 2 beats or 2 beats. There is no speeding up and slowing down, which we've talked about Igor Cavalera. We talked about Dave Lombardo. They famously do this unintentionally, which makes the music sound a little different. Anyway, this drum machine allowed for what's called swing. So you could give it a little bit of a more human pattern, which helps build into a groove. And the swing is what creates the typical nodding that you hear when people listen to hip hop. There's that groove into the repeating rhythm. And the other benefit was when you use this thing, it allows the drums to drag a little bit behind the beat. So we're going to get into a little bit of music nerdery here, but one of the funniest experiences Tim and I have had together is in Tim's truck to drive to the Limp Bizkit concert. Tim was amazed that I could actually keep a beat because apparently most people are kind of slow and can't. But what we mean by behind the beat is if you're counting off fours, when the drums are dragging, they're a little bit behind, a half step behind. It's almost like when you download an illegal movie and you watch it and the audio is a little bit behind their mouths moving. That's how, when you think about dragging, that's how those of you that are not musical recording inclined should think about it. Did I get it, Tim? Am I describing it correctly?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, you're there.
It's a little bit off the beat. It's a little bit behind it. And that subtle difference to a skilled lyricist gives them a lot of space to work in. Where, and again, Tim and I talk about how things sound so mechanic. This allowed things to not sound so mechanical.
Yeah, that's more of what we'd be going for. It's like a humanized feeling instead of
Mm-hmm.
a machined feeling. You know, like well, here you go. Let's see if we can see it. This
Oh,
is
okay. There
my
you go.
this is my little machine. This is an Akai MPC Studio, which is just the MIDI controller. But yeah, you can set swing on all this. I do it all the time.
Really, really cool. But it also, Tim, if keep me honest here, this the Akai allows you can then slice your samples up and play them in rhythm,
Yeah,
right? So
definitely.
it has that hip hop punch, but it sounds a little bit more like a live band as opposed to a bunch of samples.
Yeah, and then you
And
can. I mean, there's so many. Like back then, that's the way they're doing it. These days, there's so many other ways to do it. You can drop it a millisecond. You can pop it up a millisecond if you really wanted to. But yeah,
uh, have you seen Whiplash, Tim?
yeah,
Are you rushing or are you dragging? That's what I think
yeah.
of when we talk about this. Like, is he going to come in and try to play faster than you give hand jobs? But what a great movie, everybody! If you haven't seen the movie Whiplash with J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller, I've never wanted to punch Miles Teller harder in the face, but it's a great movie. Anyway,
Yeah, it's like
the other thing.
and like another thing back then is they used a lot of slower BPMs to like get that boom bap feeling because you can't really. I mean, you could, but like you can't really make a boom bap beat at like 150 BPMs. You know what I
Oh,
mean? That would
oh,
be more of like a trap beat these days.
yeah, yeah. And the other thing, when you held up Yurikai, there's pads on it, so you
Yeah,
can actually play what amounts to drums by hand, as opposed to trying to tweak a sample a little bit faster, a little bit slower, but this on that. You can then record the beats on your own pads and then loop it, which
yeah,
gives you it makes things a bit more human.
yeah. We use the pads to chop samples and everything nowadays. So
It's That's normal, right? I get fed Instagram ads for those things all the time, and I'm like, I know if I start investing in these, I'm gonna have all this other hardware sitting here, and then it's gonna get out of control because I just can't control
shit.
myself.
I should show you my other Akai.
I can't. I've seen shots of your desk and it terrifies me. That's why I'm scared to like show you like all the keyboard shit I do. By the way, the keyboard that I own actually has a built-in mouse jiggler protocol where I can hit a button and it makes the mouse move so my computer won't go to sleep. It's kind of wild.
Ah,
Shouldn't say that because of work. Anyway, now let's talk about producers. So whereas your artist, your recording artist is say the construction crew, your producer is your architect. And the first producer we're going to talk about, Tim, is DJ Premier. So one
oh yeah.
half of Gangstar. He produced Nas. He produced Jay-Z. He produced Biggie Smalls. His other big thing was chopping.
Yeah.
So he would sample individual notes, stabs, vocal snippets, and then play them on the pads to create entirely new melodies, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah, that's what I was saying with the MPC I have. It's, you could just pull up a sample, chop the shit out of it, and then completely change it. I mean, there's like unlimited possibilities anymore.
It's really, really cool. DJ Premier, his thing was scratch a vocal hook from a different song over a drum break, which is hip hop referencing hip hop, which is really kind of cool in the fact that it's self-referential. But it's using hip hop to build hip hop itself. The famous example I will give is Nas's New York State of Mind,
Oh yeah.
where the hook is a sample from Rakim, from Eric B. and Rakim, which is really kind of cool. And Nas did this a lot. He did it on Illmatic. He did it on Ready to Die, which it's funky, right? It's funky, but it's also, I guess another word I would use, maybe rugged.
Dude, New York State of Mind is probably one of the most iconic beats of all time.
Yes, yes.
When that intro comes in, that's an instant you're like, "Oh fuck yeah."
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Along the same lines, so DJ Premier is the hard chop guy. He's the one who's known for chopping. Now we're gonna go to Pete Rock. So Pete Rock, his big toy was the SP 1200. So his thing was he would grab bass lines out of just weird, obscure jazz records and funk and soul records, and then he would run it through a filter, which strips out all the high end. So it would just leave the bass and the lower frequency, which is
Yep.
really, really, really kind of cool. I did you see, by the way, Tim, as an aside, did you have a pop up in your Instagram feed? There was a video which talked about how Mike Shinoda made the intro for Paperclip, which is a sample from a James Bond movie that he reverses and loops on itself. And have you seen that?
No, no.
I gotta find that and send it to you. It is, I don't know how the artists that do it. I really don't, because it truly is something to be able to hear a sample and say, I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna reverse it, I'm gonna speed it up, and then I'm gonna cut it in pieces and layer it, and then it's good. God bless. God bless. But anyway,
Yeah,
Pete Rock.
we did that. So Saturday night, me and my buddy make a bunch of beats. And that's what that's a thing that we still use to this day, which is the Pete Rock thing. So you grab a sample, you're having trouble making the bass line for it, so you take that sample, you completely take all the high end and mid out of it. You drown out that low to where it's barely noticeable, not barely. And then you put it right under the sample, so you use the actual bass from the sample as the bass.
as the bass,
Yeah. Do it all the time. It
which
works
is, I mean,
perfectly.
wild, right? Because you're I'm not going to say hacking it, but you're literally hacking the system to use itself for
Yeah.
itself, which is kind of interesting. Well, you know what, Tim? I was thinking about it earlier today. We probably should do an episode on just sampling and start with the Vanilla Ice. Do you remember the Vanilla Ice kerfluffle when he
Oh yeah.
tried to explain how, well, there's his dun 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 dun, and he
Yeah.
it just totally made an ass out of himself. We
Doesn't
do
he
need to
still
talk about
pay?
that.
Doesn't he still pay like for that? Like I think he
Oh, every
pays
time that
like
song is, he plays royalties on that.
yeah,
He has to
that's
pay
what I mean.
royalties on it.
I mean that's a classic song though.
I mean, I remember seeing David Bowie in concert, and he played Under Pressure, which is where it's from. And at first, I was like, my juvenile brain said, "He's playing Vanilla Ice," and then I went, "No, no, 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 this is the original." Whatever.
I
I
think
was
I
I
think that
was
happened to us as
18.
kids in a lot of songs. Like there's still kids these days that'll argue with you that like The Hurt was originally done by Johnny Cash. You know what I mean?
I can't entertain this. What was Tommy Lee Jones? What did he say to Jim Carrey on the set of Batman? I cannot sanction this buffoonery. So if Premier is the king of chop, Pete Rock is the quote unquote soul brother, right? He was the one using filter and groove. He would take a horn from one record, a bass line from another, drums from a third, and create this giant wall of sound. Best example is Nas, "The World Is Yours,"
Oh yeah.
right? This is jazz influence because you're literally pulling pieces from different areas, making a pancake, and then rolling it out.
Another thing that's still done. All
And
these techniques are still done widely.
oh, it's because they wrote the book. They wrote the
Yeah,
book. The other thing is
exactly.
he would use horns, a lot of horn samples, which a lot of other people did not use at the time.
Yeah, dude, you take a horn, you reverse it, you don't even know it's a horn sometimes.
It sounds backwards. Now we're going to talk about a name that everybody knows, Q-Tip,
Oh yeah.
right? So he was the lead producer of the Tribe Called Quest. He produced the Low End Theory in 91. He produced Midnight Marauders for them in 93. Interesting because he was a big fan of bebop and jazz. Those albums both used an upright bass, which has a totally different sound than anybody like Winston Marsalis or any of those bass players. Uh, Upright is a totally different monster. It is a totally different monster.
Yeah, Q-Tip did a lot of Mob Deep stuff, especially
Hmm.
on the
Hmm.
very early stuff. He's a huge influence on that.
He apparently was a big believer in taking harmonically complex yet minimalist beats, and he did a lot through with chords, progressions. Art Blakely, Ron Carter were two jazz artists he sampled liberally from. He was a big fan of that. Which also, if you think about it, this is a burgeoning style where everybody is sampling from different pieces. If you're pulling from something more obscure, your stuff is going to stand out a little bit more because not everybody's going into the same well for the amen break. Let's put it that way. And he was a big influence on producers, the younger audience will remember now know names like Pharrell Williams or names like Jay Dilla, right?
Yeah.
Q-Tip's big influences them.
Havoc. Yeah.
Yep. Now we're going to get to somebody who I still think is just musically just terrifyingly brilliant, the RZA.
Oh yeah.
So the RZA, they recorded Enter the Wu-Tang 36 chambers in a low budget studio. He actually used the noise and the tape hiss in the recording. He was using a Ensoniq ASR 10 EPS 16 plus along with the SP 1200. So the ASR gave him the ability to create longer samples. So everybody who remembers those Wu-Tang albums, there's a lot of kung fu movie dialogue. There's these weird, wailing sounds which almost sound like chipmunks, and piano loops which are off key. And if you look at some of those earlier, I'm going to call them compositions that he did for the Wu-Tang Clan, they it almost comes off like a import movie or like a bad B movie or a rip of a copy of a copy of a VHS movie that everybody's passed around. And very cinematic is the way I would describe it. He also was known for sampling things at the wrong speed or even out of phase, which if you go back and listen to the 36 Chambers, that's what he was doing, right? Weird loops out of phase. When you listen to something out of phase, Tim, it took me ages to understand what it sounds like when something is out of phase. And once I understood it, I was like, oh,
Oh
dear
yeah.
God. And I first heard that referenced in a interview with the VOD guys when they talked about when they were recording Imprint, how one of the songs needed to be re-recorded because the guitars, when they layered them on top of one another, sounded completely out of phase, which is really kind of fascinating.
Yeah, nowadays you have a button in your DAW, you just reverse the
Bink.
phase. Yeah.
Yep. Bink. Done. And the last producer we're going to get to is I'd never heard of this one, Tim, when I was doing my digging. The Beat Miners,
Oh yeah.
Evil D, Mr. Walt, the Boot Camp Click.
Yeah, boot camp click, Smith and Wesson, all that.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, Smith and Wesson, Black Moon entered the
Yep.
stage in '93, to Shining in '95. Very dark. I read it described as murky, bass heavy, the Brooklyn sound. It was called. Just muffled bass lines and filtered samples. It sounded like they were coming out of a subway tunnel, which is kind of cool. Really kind of cool.
Yeah, this is why the '90s were the best for pretty
Yeah, I
much
mean,
everything.
and when you look at some of these tools and who's still using what, like I mean, DJ Premier, Pete Rock, Q-Tip, the RZA, Kanye West, Fatboy Slim, the Technics turn. We could just do an entire episode on the Technics turntable and the history thereof. This stuff was key. Was key at that point. Tim, let's talk about the boroughs, the five boroughs, and specifically, we're going to dig into how each borough had its own brand. An identity for that region. So when people think of New York, they think of Manhattan, right? Because everybody thinks of Times Square and Central Park and the museum and all that sort of stuff. They don't think about the outer boroughs, which is where some of the more interesting culture is coming from. And in the late 80s, there was actually something which was called the Bridge Wars, which was a feud between Boogie Down Productions in the Bronx and the Juice Crew in Queensbridge.
Yeah.
And really, it was over arguing who was the birthplace of hip hop, much like for us local yokels, Pats and Geno's arguing about the birthplace of the cheesesteak. And
Both trash.
I don't know, man. I'll take a Pat's cheesesteak when I'm not drinking. I'll take it.
I'll take
I'll
a
take it.
Pats over any of the tourist joints for sure.
Yes, yes. Okay, so we're going to start with Queensbridge. And back to what I was saying, where we talked about how there was a lot of crime in the late 80s, early 90s. New York is going through gentrification. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the presence of public housing in the outer boroughs and how that impacted some of these sounds. So Queensbridge Houses was the largest public housing development in North America. Marley Marl and the Juice Crew came from here. Nas comes from Queensbridge, and one could say that the Queensbridge sound is the housing projects, right? The housing projects narrative. This is Nas with Illmatic in '94. This is where he Queensbridge. Everybody knows the name of this place. Most people haven't been to it, but everybody knows the name of this place. The little literary companion I saw referenced. Found out, fell down some weird rabbit holes building this one, people. Was William Faulkner's Yaknawa Potawatomi County? And I definitely butchered that. But again, Nas was talking about real life. So the sights, the sounds, the projects, what it was like going through, growing up, living up there, sitting on a park bench and watching the world go by. We'll talk about your neighbors. That's what he talked about. And you have his unique style, right? So he had a very dense flow, very monosyllabic, multisyllabic, I should say. And he collaborated with guys we just named: Premier, Pete Rock, Q-Tip, Large Professor. He was the sound of New York in '94. He was the sound of New York. The other side of Queensbridge is your boys, Mobb Deep. So Nas is typically considered the poet. Mobb Deep were basically war reporters, Prodigy and Havoc. So the infamous of '95, this was a more bleak version where Nas was more poetic, talking about looking at his neighbors and what they could be going through. This was very, very bleak and paranoid. A very, very different way to look at the same place. The songs that stood out when I did my research, names like Shook One's Part Two, Survival of the Fittest. It was dark, cold, menacing. Another word you could
Oh
use
yeah.
to describe this stuff. Dungeon rap
Oh yeah.
has that kind of aesthetic. And they also introduced
Nas
their own.
talks about that all the time, straight from the dungeons of rap.
Uh, there you go. And the other thing about Mobb Deep is they introduced their own slang. So a song like "done," meaning a friend or an associate, came from them, and it shows up everywhere in New York hip hop.
The Dun language. Yep.
Yes. So we've got Staten Island, we've got Queensbridge. Now we're gonna go to Staten Island, which I thought was all Italian garbage collectors, but here we are. Staten Island is the Wu-Tang Clan. So before '93, Staten Island was like, again, garbage men, mob guys. Who the hell was out there? But the Wu-Tang Clan was there. They rechristened the entire borough to Shaolin, and they built this whole mythology around comic books and kung fu and the 5% Nation, their mathematics. And I mean, this was any one of these guys by themselves was impressive, but when you put them all together, you end up with this insane murderer's row of the RZA, the Jizza, Old Dirty Bastard, Method Man, Raekwon, and Ghostface. So,
Spec the deck.
right, this shows that this shows that these guys could show up in a fairly isolated part of New York. Again, the only way to get Staten Island is bridge to bridge, Verrazano to Goethals, right? So it's not like you're walking. You literally could walk across. Well, you could technically, you could go to a bridge into Queens, all that, but it's a very weird, isolated little island off the southern tip of Manhattan. And yet now these guys have established it as a hip hop ground zero. They The other interesting thing about the Wu-Tang Clan that a lot of people probably don't recognize is their uniqueness at the time for their business model, where they signed to Loud Records to release their Wu-Tang stuff, but individual members retain the rights for them to do solos. So that means that you have Liquid Swords, Only Built for Cuban Links, Return of the 36 Chambers, Tikal. You had all these members. What was the name of ODB's album?
Oh,
I
shit.
can't say it out loud. All of them did their own thing. They all did their thing, but they also still contributed to the Wu-Tang Clan aesthetic, which is really, I mean, talk about like, hey, we're all going to get famous, and then we're going to go do our own things, but we still have that collective together. It's kind of cool.
You think they're the biggest brand in hip hop?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely.
Like sound, audio, visual. When you say a Wu-Tang song, even someone who's even remotely passingly knowledgeable on hip hop knows what it's going to sound like. When it's if you compare something and say it's got that Wu-Tang touch to it, I'm expecting Chop Socky samples and like just again tape hiss, that weird sort of stuff that God, the RZA is a genius. He's an absolute genius. All right, we're moving away from Staten Island, and we're coming away from Queens. We're going into Brooklyn, or as they like to call it, Crooklyn, right? So this was a very rugged and aggressive style. This was a very the borough had a reputation for being rugged and tough. So this is where Jay-Z comes from, out of the Marcy Projects. Reasonable Doubt in '96. I mean, this was him. This was him like coming out into his own. We're not going to talk about the Epstein files right now, but good luck, Jay. I hope it all works out for you at the Super Bowl. Told you should have booked Metallica. Anyway, we also have Biggie, the Notorious B.I.G. He came out of Bed-Stuy, ready to die in '94. He was kind of the first hip hop guy that went from the raw stuff that all the guys in the corner wanted to listen to something that could actually get onto the radio. And he had his timbre, his tenor, his flow it seemed almost effortless, and he had a little bit of charisma. If I'm going to be honest with you, his locution and the way he spoke, kind of made you pay attention.
I'm
I mean,
actually I'm not a fan of Biggie at all.
um, I will. My hip hop, and I have a very limited, I guess, white boy type aesthetic when it comes to hip hop. I will listen to all the stuff from the Source hip hop hits up through like volume 12, because that's the stuff that I knew. It was the popular stuff that showed up on the radio and showed up on MTV. I'm not like you, Tim. I'm not going digging into the weeds for this stuff because it's kind of lost on me. Kind of lost.
shit, if you start doing that, you'll have a plethora, whatever you want to call it, of just
There's not enough
time
hours in the day.
to.
I can't keep
That's
up
what I
with
mean.
you.
Yeah. Good luck.
The last band we're going to talk about in Brooklyn is the Boot Camp Click. So this was Black Moon, Smith and Wesson, Helter Skelter, and OGC. So this is where the birthplace of Timbs and hoodies comes in as an aesthetic. These are the first guys to actually wear that outfit. And whereas Biggie was a little bit flashy and Jay-Z was a little bit more refined, these guys were just kind of grimier. They were grimier, they were grittier, and they argue that this is the real Brooklyn sound, very very lo-fi, very bass heavy, just representative of where they come from. Kind of interesting.
You would
Man,
probably
this
like
was a
some
hell
of
of a
that
trip for
stuff.
me to learn. I've learned so much about it. The last borough we're going to talk about is the Bronx. The Bronx, and we're going to blend it in with Harlem. So this is,
Let me guess.
let's see
Let
here.
me guess. Big L.
Big L, Fat Joe, Lord Finesse, Showbiz, and AG. So
Mm.
this was a personification of the old school, came from the block party, went to the electronic stuff. This was the quote unquote true school. Big L was the one artist I found that got a lot of nods. He is renowned for his punchlines and his horrorcore adjacent storytelling.
Oh yeah.
Uh, by the way, I love the intentional misspellings. When people say like, "Hey, why does Grinder or some of those other apps spell the way they do when they leave letters out?" It's like because we had titles like "Lifestyles of the Poor and Dangerous,"
Mm-hmm.
95 underground
Great
classic.
record.
Influenced Eminem. Influenced Eminem. The Harlem produced Cameron, Horse and Carriage, and Mace, Children of the Corn. They would define the quote unquote Jiggy era alongside Puff Daddy. Again, we're gonna have to touch on Puff Daddy, but hopefully he doesn't touch on us. Now we're gonna talk about the go long investments in Johnson Johnson baby oil. So now we're going to talk about how the style evolves, Tim, over time, which starts out with the term I saw used by one writer was Afrocentric positivity, and that's how the decade started in the early 90s, carry over in the 80s, and it ends with the shiny suit materialism.
Mm.
So when you think about the early 90s, this is a Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Brand Nubian. They sung a lot about Black empowerment, spirituality, social commentary, bohemian hip hop, samples from eclectic sources, lyrics about individuality, even a rejection of what we now know as the masculine, hyper masculine gangster stereotype. It was more intellectual, I would argue, as an approach to hip hop as opposed to some of the other stuff you would see. But then we have 95, and this is where things start to shift. So this is where the rappers that are inspired by the King of New York, by the way, great movie, amazing cast, still holds up.
Which one?
King of New York, Christopher Walken.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
The amount of actors that show up looking like they're 12 in that movie is totally insane. In 95, you have rappers who are looking at King of New York, looking at Goodfellas, looking at Scarface, and they're starting to take this mobster persona. And you have Raekwon, who his alias is the Chef, only built for Cuban links. Ghostface, he calls himself either Lex Diamond's Tony Stark's. So they started rapping about drug cartels, betrayal, high end luxury. This is where Cristal shows up being mentioned all the time. Expensive clothings. These guys are really painting a picture of this fancy cinematic universe. And on the back of this, and Raekwon doing this, it all explodes. Nas forms the Firm with AZ and Foxy Brown. Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt, where he's presented himself as a drug dealer and CEO. Little do we know, he was a drug dealer and a CEO, and apparently a pedophile. We're not allegedly.
Oh
Nobody cut
yeah.
me off of that. Allegedly. But this is
Don't
where
sue us.
I said allegedly. It's a qualifier. This is where the shift represents from. They're moving from the tough, the grimy world of their communities and the outer boroughs where they come from, and it's starting to move towards capitalism. And hey, we gotta get paper, we gotta get wealth. In
Can't blame
'97,
them.
no. I mean, hey, you gotta get yours before you stop breathing, right? In '97, Biggie dies. Famously shot Where was he shot? Was it Vegas? No, Tupac was in the car with Suge Knight.
That
Where
was
was Biggie
Vegas,
shot?
California.
Was it in California? Uh, we could talk about the whole East Coast, left coast schism. We could do another episode. We could do another bunch of episodes on that. But this, when Biggie is shot, Puffy, Sean Puff Daddy Combs, I'll use his full name, and Bad Boy Records, this is where they start going into these fancy Hype Williams type shit, right? Shiny suits and Missy Elliott, Super Duper Fly, like shit. Almost wanted to give you a stroke, but it was very much using '80s samples, stuff from the Police, David Bowie, and they're really talking about wealth and partying. So you have your mainstream hip hop at the time, which is stuff on the radio, the stuff on MTV. This is Puff Daddy, this is Mace, this is Will Smith. But on the other side, you have your underground stuff, which is the boot camp click. This is Raucous Records. Uh, the '95 Source Awards, where Suge Knight gets up and boos Puff Daddy. This was a demonstration of the difference between the quote unquote real streets of hip hop and the commercial dancers, the shiny suit folks. Uh,
What's that line he says on the Source Words? The producer, what's he say? Dancing all up in the videos.
mhm.
That's something like that. I remember I've seen it a million times. That's for exactly what he says.
Every time I see Puffy's name, all I think of the picture of him riding the bike and 50 Cent right below it says, there ain't no seat on that bike.
Yeah, dude, hilarious.
He is terrible. So the mainstream is moving towards a rap pop hybrid. The underground scene at that time kind of coalesces and it says, oh, well, we're not part of that. We're part of this. So this is indie labels, college radio, vinyl distribution. This is stuff that isn't inside the major label system, but it keeps them relevant and helps it grow. A lot of one-to-one comparison could be made to what we see in hip hop and to what we see in hardcore, right? Where those second and third tier labels keep the theme alive, keep the thread alive, and they're keeping all those things tied together. So Raucous Records is the big one. This was founded in '95. This is Pharoah Monch. This is Mos Def. This is Talib Kweli. This is Company Flow. This was basically social consciousness rapping. In '98, you have Black Star, which is Mos Def and Talib Kweli. This is, the song definition. They're talking about the violence that's going on right now in that hip hop era, and they were really trying to bring people back to the roots of intelligence and adding some soul and going back to what it was, not all flash and pizzazz and trying to get famous and rich. Company Flow, his album Fun Crusher Plus comes out in '97. It was produced by LP. And this is an album that is largely considered creating the template for indie rap, which is lo-fi and anti-commercial and honestly kind of dissonant in its sound. It laid the ground for the early 2000s, the Def Jux era, showing that there is what this album helped to establish is it showed the fans of true hip hop that there is a viable market for stuff that is kind of weird, kind of like indie alt avant-garde. The musical equivalent with a rock band will be Butthole Surfers, Jesus Lizard, that weirder alternative type stuff. It showed that in hip hop they had their own version of weirder alternative, and it worked.
When they called that like the eclectic side.
Yes, very very much slapdash, right? It's all holding together, but we're not really sure how. The next we're talking about a guy, my God, he's legendary. The Mask gives it away. MF Doom, Babito Garcia, Fondulum Records. They released MF Doom's early stuff. Operation Doomsday in '99 was him totally giving the finger to the shiny suit cadre, and it talked about wordplay and obscure samples. I would put it definitely was in New York, but like when I think of MF Doom, you know what I think of? I think of Dr. Octagon. That's what I think of. Weird samples and kind of just different sounding where you made you pay attention. It made you pay attention.
He passed a little bit ago.
Yeah. There. Another thing we have to talk about is, again, this is the '90s, so we still have terrestrial radio. WKCR, which is 89.9 FM. This was the ground zero for '90s New York City hip hop. This broadcast from 1 to 5 a.m. And they would actually put on unsigned artists So they could do freestyle. They could drop demos. The Stretch Armstrong and Bobbito show, 1 to 5 a.m. Jeez. Uh, but when you talk about who came through the show and artists who all of us will recognize, Nas, Biggie, Jay-Z, the Wu-Tang Clan, Big L, Eminem. And what was made this show so impressive is the two hosts were guys who were discerning hip hop heads who knew their shit. So if you could get on this show and you could survive and you could show up as authentic, at that point you came out and you were basically given a big old legit stamp. That was them giving you the nod, saying these guys are good, move them forward, they're good to go.
Remember, it's like back in the old days, if like you made it on Johnny Carson, you pretty much had a fucking career
Yep.
after.
Well, if you made it on one of those as a comedian, if you made it on one of those things, you were set. You were set. Now we've got Kill Tony, which, by the way, there was one I was watching where the comedian was roasting one of the guys on the panel, and he just buried him. And I was like, that's great. That's great. I love when they actually go at each other.
Kill Tony's great.
Yes, there are some really legitimately funny people that come through that doing stand up. The one was the one Russian guy. I forget his name. He is so funny. So funny.
Who is it?
I think he's Russian or he's Eastern European. He has a very funny delivery, thick accent.
Yeah, I forget who that is.
I can picture his face. Too. I can picture his face. I can't, whatever. So anyway, now we're also going to talk about, we talked about Stretch and Bobbito. Now we've got the Lyricist Lounge. So this was open mic nights. This was on the Lower East Side in 91. And this was just a studio apartment that they would invite.
Was this the Cypher?
Yes. This is where it came from. This is where it came from. This was physically, they would do it in person, a bunch of people standing around in a circle, dropping bars and then spitting bars and then passing the microphone back and forth. So they're all trading freestyles. Kind of wild that this would happen in a studio apartment in the Lower East Side, but it's interesting that these were guys who honed their lyrics. Like you had to be a good lyricist. They would be in public too. They would do stuff in Union Square. They would do stuff in Washington Square Park. They would just gather and battle. And that, I mean, you get better in sports by playing in people that are more talented than you, that are better than you. It makes sense that these guys would do the exact same thing. And those ciphers are where, everybody learns you got to get your shit together. A guy, when I think of hip hop, who actually has some wild wordplay, Lil Dicky. Where I total cheese. The freestyle he does with Sway in the Morning. I've watched this thing 500 times because how he ties everything together and tells the story and gets the words to rhyme is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anyway,
I've seen that before, but I don't remember the last time I have.
Dude, you got to check that out. Some of the lines, he's like, when he talks about his girls, bombs or jihad, like it's just it really is. He puts some shit together in an interesting way. All right, back to the 90s in New York. Now we're going to talk about fashion. We're going to talk about fashion. We're going to talk about a little bit about slang. So there was a crew called the Low Lifes, and they were all about Ralph Lauren polo gear. They were a crew from Brooklyn. And they basically recontextualized waspy aristocracy, what shit that white people would wear, into ghetto aspiration. And they would shoplift a lot of it. They would wear it from head to toe. Raekwon was shown wearing a bunch of polo stuff in the Can It Be All So Simple video. So that's where you start seeing polo show up as hip hop fashion. But then you saw stuff like Karl Kani, FUBU. This is where things start coming out, catering specifically to the New York hip hop market. Things like Mecca Denim, things like Echo Unlimited, things like it was spelled NYC, but it's an Iche, is how you would say it, right? All that stuff came out of this aesthetic. It's baggy jeans, oversized hoodie, very, very colorful. Tommy Hilfiger. Tommy Hilfiger was an unknown brand until hip hop took it. And then he famously said some terrible shit about it, which kind of, showed his true
Did he?
colors. Oh yeah, he made some kind of racist remark about who he wants wearing his clothes and who he doesn't. But
Hmm.
again, I remember going to the store in the late '90s. I mean, you could walk into I forget the name of the store. It wasn't Journeys and it wasn't Hot Topic, but it was something adjacent. And they would have a whole section which was all like new metal clothes, like the stuff you'd see on a Hot Topic. And on the other side was
Zoomies.
no, it's long gone. But on the other side was like Mecca denim. Like I had an Aniche shirt. I was not a hip hop guy. I had a bunch of stuff from Mecca. I liked it because it was always cut big. I loved Echo Unlimited clothes because all their stuff was cut big and baggy. So like the shorts always fit nice and whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Anyway, this was repurposing luxury brands into something that represents themselves. And another thing we're going to talk about is like let's talk about language, let's talk about dialect, let's talk about slang. So the 5% nation, the nation of gods and earths, which was a splinter group of the nation of Islam, this very, very, very heavily influences the that get used in this 90s New York hip hop world. Things like words like God, earth, cipher, dropping science, word is bond, peace. Those are all from teachings from the 5%, right? Which backs up to the Nation of Islam. Was that Farrakhan, Nation of Islam? I think. I don't know. Supreme mathematics, supreme alphabet, uh, wild. Wu-Tang, they were a step ahead of their game. They lead into all this stuff. And you needed to be a little bit sharp to truly not to understand what the story they were trying to tell under some of these things because it was tied to some of these other headier concepts. The dead ass came from the 90s, New York. Brick, extremely cold weather, not like bricked up. Gully, a herb. We've all heard the term a herb. Dun or son, to talk about a friend. I didn't know dead ass truly came from New York. That's New York hip hop. That's kind of terrifying. Every time someone says that, no cap, straight buzzing dead ass, I just they start with
Slaps.
the what is it? The Zoomer speak, and my brain kind of reboots. So the other two things we probably should talk about. Let's talk about the venues, the clubs that were big in New York. There used to be a club scene in Manhattan, believe it or not. And that nightlife was the big engine that kept this culture going. It's where you went to see and be seen. You showed up in your best clothes. The Latin Quarter, which is where the Stop the Violence movement began. This was the late 80s, early 90s. This is Public Enemy and X-Clan. This is where they started. This was the incubator for the golden era. But as the decade progressed, the venue that's most closely associated with hip hop was the Tunnel. This was a Sunday night hip hop spot. It was hosted by Funkmaster Flex. It truly was in a tunnel. It was a Peter Gadian joint. He owned this. He owned Club USA. He owned the Limelight. He owned the Palladium. Which, by the way, if you ever see Tim, I don't know if you saw it on my Plex server. That Limelight documentary is really, really interesting
I
about the
don't
New
think I've
York
seen
club
that on
scene.
there.
Uh, it eventually closes in 2001 because Rudy Giuliani, right? Not only with gentrifying New York, the gentrifying Times Square, he kind of gentrified the whole friggin' island. Who was a famous bouncer at the tunnel, Tim? A famous actor we would know. He's in a franchise of movies, which is up to number 9. I'll give you a
Oh,
hint.
bald.
Cars,
The
bald,
the
family. Come on.
what the what is his
His
name? It's
last
right
name is a
there.
type of an engine, and it's not gasoline, but
Vin Diesel.
there you go. Ding, 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 ding. Vin Diesel, bouncer at the tunnel. Kind of funny. We also need to talk about the East Coast and West Coast rivalry. So on the West Coast, you have LA and Death Row Records. This is Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Um, New York, New York, the Dog Pound releases that. And it's kind of shown that the New Yorkers took insult as that. Capone and Noriega did LA, which also featured Mobb Deep and Tragedy Gaddafi, and it used the same beat as New York, New York, but they slowed it down. So this is where famously this East Coast, West Coast bullshit comes to a head in 95 at the Source Awards in New York City. This is where Suge Knight insults Puffy on stage. Right after this, you have Tupac in 96 and Biggie in 97, both killed, which basically ends the golden era of hip hop, fractures it into a million pieces. And we ended up, I think we ended up worse off because of it. I really do think we ended up worse off because of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's the same thing when you talk about, say, like Kurt Cobain or something. It's like what could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Them dudes
Yeah.
would still be rapping right now, probably.
And I'll bet, and I really do believe there's been some speculation. I really do believe those two were probably friends. They probably were. They talked behind the scenes. They knew what was going on. They were just, I mean, the best basketball players, the best athletes have someone who's almost their peer pushing them, right? Like, I mean, Jordan was the best basketball player for how many years, but he always compared himself to Johnson and Magic Johnson and to Isaiah Thomas and Karl Malone and Charles Barkley. And to him, it was always Ewing, who he was playing against, is what motivated him. And you need that yin and yang to make things go forward. We've talked about a lot of these artists, Tim. I think I'm just going to real quickly blast through. If any of our listeners are interested in what key releases should you be listening to in these different chunks of the 90s. So the Bridge to the Golden Area is 90 to 92. So this is A Tribe Called Quest with Low End Theory. This is Gangstar with Daily Operation, and this is Pete Rock and CL Smooth with Mecca and the Soul Brother. So this is the Golden Era bridge. This is where it's coming from the 80s into the early 90s. Then you have the explosion in 93 and 94. This is Enter the Wu-Tang by the Wu-Tang Clan in 93. Nas is Illmatic in 94. Biggie's Ready to Die in 94. Right? So these are the albums that this is where, boom, hip-hop literally explodes. You're going to hit your peak in 95 or 96. This is where things peak, and then we start shifting into that whole leisure, flashy shit. This is Mobb Deep, the infamous in 95. Raekwon, Only Built for Cuban Links in 95. Reasonable Doubt by Jay-Z in 96. And the Fugees in 96. The Score. This was on the back of Wyclef Jean, Pras, and
Yeah.
Lauryn Hill because they could sing, rap, and there was reggae bits to it. So, I mean, it really was a great album. And then Pras ended up, arrested for tax evasion. Lauryn Hill kind of self-immolated where she would just became known as very difficult. And then Wyclef went on to do all sorts of great shit. So,
Oh yeah.
God
He's still
bless.
doing stuff.
Yeah, he's still banging around. And then 97 to 99, this is where the getting jiggy with it piece, Will Smith, and the underground split. So on one side, you've got Notorious B.I.G. with Life After Death, Puff Daddy and the Family with No Way Out. And on the other side, you've got Company Flow with Fun Crusher Plus. You've got Most Def and Tilly McQuelly with Black Star, and then MF Doom with Operation Doomsday. So this is truly where you see that bifurcation. And then we end up with, God, at some point we end up with like Lean and SoundCloud rappers and Chopped and Screwed, and everything just goes downhill from here.
Mumble
Eh,
rap.
yeah. Oh Lord. Uh, just wait till we do our deep dive into Little Peep. Anyway, if we're gonna re-summarize these chunks, 1992 is conscious jazz rap. 93, 94 is the hardcore boom bap. 95, 96 is mafioso rap and that dungeon sound. And then you got 97 to 99, which is the Jiggy era split with the underground.
To me, it dies in '96. I don't care for any of the jiggy era underground shit. Really don't care.
Sadly, that's the stuff I remember because but then again, it was, if you go back and none of these are on Spotify because of the rights. It's somebody who crafts their own playlist based upon the original playlist of the albums. The Source Hip Hop Hits was a decent mix of all these different subgenres, which was really cool for someone who was not versed. I would see like five. I mean, Young B would see 5 songs that he recognizes and get 15 songs total. It's kind of cool. I think we can say the symbolic end of the era is 2001 when Rudy Giuliani finally closes the tunnel. At this point, the music industry had shifted. So you're moving from the raw sound with a lot of samples, very sample heavy. Now you're going to synthesizer based beats in the 2000s, mainly because it was too hard to clear the samples and it was too expensive, right, to get all those things. Sadly, uh, while that represents a changing of the guard and a changing of the times, the impact of the 90s in New York on hip hop, this is foundation for what we know and listen to today. I'll name 3 off the top of my head: Biggie, Nas, and Jay-Z. All 3 of them have influenced multiple generations of hip hop artists, all back from the same chunk of time in New York. They're studied by most MCs. That's who they study. And that attitude, that attitude that came out of that 90s hip hop, the fashion, right? Fashion is still a big part of hip hop. There's a large part of hip hop that's very, very fashion forward and fashion focused.
Oh yeah.
The slang, that attitude, it takes hip hop from a music genre and truly makes it a culture.
A
And it was a
brand,
culture
yeah.
defined by a youth culture, which is really, really, really interesting. And before we close it out, I'm going to kick it to you, Tim, but I'm going to say that it's kind of funny that a bunch of old records that you turn into samples and 10 seconds of a sample remastered, rejiggered, removed around can create an entire genre of music. So I talked a lot, Tim. What do you think?
I think that, wanting to talk about this was for a reason because, you know, like I said, I think the 90s era of hip hop is probably the best era of all time. I don't think anything will ever beat it. I think everything nowadays is too overproduced. I think a lot of rap has lost where it really came from, and nowadays it's like a lot of that shit is trash, dude. Most of it is just
Eh,
trash.
So I don't. So I'm gonna slightly disagree with you. I don't think it's trash. I think it doesn't have soul.
Well, that's basically
Like
what I was saying. Like
these
it's
guys came from. They were singing about what they know,
yeah,
and I mean, it's like, hey, the nepo babies, right? The kids who grew up rich and their parents, the same idiots that are out there protesting, the same people that go home to their parents' trust fund driving a Lexus. It's like,
yeah. It's like you're never gonna be able to catch that feel again of like 36 Chambers will never be duplicated ever.
no, 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 no,
You
no, no,
know,
no.
the infamous will never be duplicated. It was just too much going on back then. It was too raw. It was too emotional. Whether you think it was or not, it was.
Hmm.
It came from a place of actual reality instead of nowadays where it's these people don't live what they rap about. That's a big problem nowadays. And, you know, a lot of people get rich that shouldn't be because the talent is just not there because people just nowadays they have terrible takes on music and, there's just a lot of shit right now that sucks and gets popular off of like things that it shouldn't get popular off of. It's just if you know what I mean, like it's just
Yeah,
you know
it's all putting on airs and presentation. It, there, we talk about this in heavy metal and hardcore. Your lizard brain picks up on when something's authentic and when it isn't. And
yeah,
a lot of this
absolutely.
stuff, a lot of the newer stuff tries to pass itself off as authentic, but it really isn't.
At 100%. Yep.
And you can't unfeel it.
Yeah. I mean, I
Can't
think
unfeel it.
I think Infamous is the best hip hop record of all time. If we're for being straight, that murder music, love it. I'll never stop listening to them two records. 36 Chambers is incredible. Like, and people probably listen to this and go, "Oh, he just likes all the pop." No, it's popular for a
Mhm.
reason because it was that good.
Yes, very, very important statement. It's
Yeah.
not popular because it's popular. It's popular because it's good.
Yeah, because it cemented what everything became. You
I
know,
mean, the Wu-Tang Clan will be long gone, and the influence of not only their combined albums as a group, but the satellite solo pieces, Bobby Digital, all that stuff is going to outlive them, and it will be influential for waves upon waves upon waves of artists to come.
I mean, look at 2025. You had the mass appeal thing where they put out the 7 records from 7 classic artists. They did huge.
Hmm.
Yeah, Nas put out a record with Premier. Mobb Deep did a record with Alchemist, and Havoc did most of the beats on it. I mean, it's who else did records for mass appeal? Google that real quick because it was Nas, it was Wu Tang. They did one for Big L. I'm pretty sure they did one for was it De La Soul? I
Let's
think
see
it was
here.
De La Soul. There should be
Uh,
7.
I'm looking for them
Was
now.
one of the Wu Tang dudes did one? There should be a list
Mass appeal.
for
Let me see
2025. They
here.
did 7 records, right?
Look at now, 2020.
I know for a fact that the Mob Deep one, Infinite, was on there. Nas just did the DJ Premier one, which was great.
Nas and DJ Premier,
Yep.
Slick Rick,
Slick Rick, there you go.
Ghostface Killer,
Ghostface, that's right.
Raekwon, Mob Deep, it says Day the Soul.
De La Soul.
I think it means De La Soul and Big
Yeah.
L.
Yep. Yeah, all 2025 releases, they all did well.
Yeah.
And a lot of them records, you listen to them, like they pretty much have the feel of that stuff. I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, it's 2025. It's produced like 2025, but it has the feel of the 90s. So it's all good stuff.
Well, I'm reading the press release here where it talked about celebrating pioneers of the genre. That was the focus. Yeah. And the series was designed to showcase artists in their current mature form rather than just nostalgia bait.
Yeah. I mean,
which is really cool. I mean, every musical subgenre has its own culture, its own, belief set, its own aesthetics, its own fashion. Hip hop is no different. But I guess the thing I would tell people who are listening to this, like, I don't even like hip hop. Why am I listening to you guys? Expand your mind, because there's different shit out there, and you might find something you really like. We're more, and with the horseshoe theory, we're more alike than we think. More alike than we think. All right.
I have a ton of people, not just before we go. I have a ton of people that always say to me, "Oh, you listen to hip hop?" I'm like, "Yeah, I probably listen to more hip hop than I do metal." They're like, "What? How? What do you mean how? Because I'm white, I can't listen to hip hop? What the fuck is that?
What do you mean how? Put on hit play, idiot. What are you fucking thinking?
Like, what are you talking about? You think I'm the only white dude that listens to rap?
Well, besides the fact that for what some people think that if you listen to heavy metal and hardcore, that's all you listen to. Whereas if it's all you listen to, you'd be a drooling sociopath.
Yeah, it's like it makes no sense.
I
also grew up in I also grew up in Southwest Philly, so it was kind of.
Well, you were in mixed schools. Like it was culture was different. Culture was different. Okay, people. Let us know what you thought of this. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Was it different? Was it interesting? Would you listen to more of stuff like this? Please leave us 267-297-4627 and leave us a voicemail. You can send us an email at newbreedpodcast@gmail.com. Leave us a YouTube comment. Shit, that's easy. Even if you listen to it and you don't even watch it on YouTube, go on, find the video, leave a comment. We're curious. Was this interesting? Did you learn something? What other music and music adjacent topics would you like us to cover? Because Tim and I, we do our fair amount of legwork with this research, but it's fun. And it's fun, and it's shit. I learned more about 90s. But I fell down a rabbit hole, and it's all I listened to for a week. And even the cats are looking at me like, what? Where's the guitars?
What is all this bass?
Yes. Yeah. When I really want to freak the cats out, I take my speaker and I put it against the wall and I turn up Sun at full volume. The whole house shakes and they're running around the house like everything's falling apart. Anyway, New Breed _ Podcast, Twitter and Instagram. We talked about our Gmail. We talked about our voicemail message. Find us on Facebook. Find us on r/New Metal. New episodes every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern. Reaction vids are coming back. Just be patient. They're coming back. We also started doing some clips and some short form stuff. So check us out on YouTube. If you're not a YouTube fan, if you're an audio only fan, check us out on YouTube. Maybe we'll get some clips, 5 to 6 minutes where we grab chunks of the shows that we think are relevant for a lot of people. Give it a go and give it a listen and let us know what you think. Maybe we'll do more of them. Until next week, it's Jay and Tim saying cheers.